We're old pros.
Welcome to moTV, another episode, another month. We've got an incredible guest with us tonight. We've got Tamsen Webster, 20-year veteran of helping companies refine their messages into refine their whole story into the absolute key message that they need to go to the market with. She spent 4 years as an executive producer of TEDx. I'm going to ask her what that means and if she ever has to get somebody off the stage quickly. And she's just a wonderful person. You're going to meet her. We're going to have a great time. Now, normally we do this in my evening, so normally I have a little drink of bourbon with me. But tonight today we shifted the time to get more of our global audience. Now, as you may know, we started this community called the Mo Mondays community, community.momondays.com. And we are getting people from all over the world. So if it's morning for you on the West Coast, grab your hot coffee, your morning coffee, your tea. If it's evening, by all means, grab a scotch, grab a bourbon, grab your evening tea if that's what you prefer. And if it's in the middle of the day, well, have whatever you want. Stick around because we are going to be right back with Tamsen Webster. Tamsen Webster, welcome to moTV.
I am so excited to be on moTV. Hello, Michelle. Hello,
Hello,
hello.
I am so excited. So, first of all, maybe I've done enough talking for the intro. You tell the moTV audience how we met because I think this is cool.
It is cool. So you and I were both in a Facebook group for speakers, which, given its founder, was a Canadian, kind of brought together, but he spoke a lot in the US, brought together a lot of folks from all over the world. And there was a lunchtime group, like Zoom actually meeting, where people would show up and just kind of chat, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic. And as you and I tended to attend that, and as we start to get to talking about what it is that we both do, the more that we learned about it, we're like, could you tell me a little bit more? Because I think you do what I do. And the more that we talked to each other and the more that we discovered more about our philosophies and how we came to it and what we do with clients and how we do it, the more we realized that we actually found like two kindred spirits, that we have a very similar approach. We do very similar work. And it was nice. It was like finding a unicorn out in the wild. So you're my unicorn, Michelle.
And I'm and you're could you be my unicorn too?
Well, it's a mutual unicorn situation. So yes, I think so.
No, it's very cool. So, and we found we almost have the same methodology. We put different names to it. We both think we're each of us is brilliant. I mean, I think I'm brilliant, and you think you're brilliant. And then when we realize we do all the same things, we have to admit that maybe there's somebody else in the world who's just as brilliant. So I don't know, but it's very cool. So you help companies, and you've worked like Johnson and Johnson, big companies, State Street Bank, major bank in the U.S. Verizon, another well-known name, but you've also worked, like me, with tiny companies that you know no one else has heard, small, mid-sized companies. But
Yep.
it doesn't matter whether we work with big companies or small companies. Everybody needs to. Why is it so? Why do you? I have my own theory. Why is it so hard for companies to kind of hone in on their key message?
Because they're in it. You know how it is. I mean, my favorite metaphor for this, and I know a lot of people say, well, a wine can't read its own label, but for all sorts of reasons, I really like the metaphor that, to me, it's more like computers can't read their own code. We do things and companies do things. A lot of times they reflect their founders, and that's actually, much prefer to work with founders and experts. I mean, I love big companies too, but I love the people who, where this is their idea. It's like, it's just juicier. But a lot of us don't stop and think about why it is that we do what we do the way that we do it. And yet that's in a lot of ways somewhat predictable, based in patterns, and it's kind of how we've decided to navigate through the world. So it really is like a code. And just like in a computer where, a computer just reads its code. It's not conscious of it, right? In order to see how a website works, there's what it looks like, but then there's all the code that drives it. And so to me, that's it. I think companies really focus on what people see. They focus on the website equivalent and not on the code behind. And so to get into that core message, I think it's both your approach and my approach, is that we actually have to open that window, look at that code and say, well, what is driving this? What are the commands that you're following and where did they come from? So that we can figure out why it is that you have the product that you have, or that you operate the way that you do, or that you value what you value, or that you serve who you serve. I think it's just
you know what, you just hit on all the possible differentiators. So I just need to slow you down a little bit for the audience. Tamsen just went through all the potential differentiators that a company might use. And you also skipped by one so fast, which I find usually is the most important one. It's the one where the gold is. It says, like, we all do the same thing. And once we're in a small market area, everybody does the same what. But how we do what we do. Yeah. You said that. Yeah. How we do what we do is very often where I look for the key differentiator, and that's where the message is.
100%. It's always there. I mean, it really, I mean, it's so rare for a company or a person. Like I said, I would work a lot with experts. So that includes a lot of thought leaders, those kinds of things, but also a lot of academics and researchers. Now, academics and researchers actually do oftentimes find something actually new, right. But the rest of us, not so often. Well, and so it really does come with how do we do what we do.
So I think, how we do what we do. But and that is the new. That is where sometimes how we do what we do is the new.
Yeah.
And that sometimes is a wow, I've never seen anybody do it that way. And it's not perfect for the whole world, but it's perfect for a sub-market.
100%. Yes. I mean, the only thing that any of us, whether individual or company, can claim is unique is the way that we've come to see the world the way that we do. So, and I would argue it's probably true that worldviews themselves are unique. But the one thing I'm sure of is that you can't duplicate how someone came to that worldview. And within that, is always such, I mean, this as well as I do, there's always such rich fodder for finding really what sets an idea, a product, a service, a company apart.
Yeah. So I think I don't want you to answer this yet.
Okay.
But I'm doing what they say in the speaking business of seeding the thought process in the listener, because I want to show a video. And I'll explain why I want to show that video. But when we come back later on, I'm going to ask you, how do people, because people say, wow, this is great stuff. I want to find out what my key message is. I want to find out how I do what I do so that I could go to market with that very strong thing. I want to discover what you described as your origin story, for lack of a better word. And I'm going to ask you for some quick steps to help people who are listening and watching this to do that. So that's coming soon. In your bio, you talk about bringing creating the story from their ideas. Mm-hmm. That's what you. So tell me why the story is important, because Mo Monday's story is everything.
Right.
And I'll tell you very quickly how they're not interested in me, they're interested in you. But anyway, I came to story because every time I drilled down to the key differentiator, I found that there was always a story behind it. And there was always a personal story. So I've become known as the personal story guy, but it doesn't have to be a personal story.
Nope.
So tell me what you mean by creating the story from ideas, the idea.
Yeah. So, where I come to that is that, yeah, particularly in early days of speaking, whatever, I actually was usually not comfortable sharing personal story. And generally, the folks that I work with, academics, engineers, researchers, scientists, also not comfortable with personal stories. And yet, the value of story is so strong. It's how we make sense of the world. It's how we establish cause and effect. It's that narrative that guides what we do. And so I started to figure out, well, what if that's how we figure out the world, if we make sense of the world through a story, then that means that any idea, we should be able to put it in the form of a story, even if it's not a once upon a time kind of story, even if we just present the elements of it in story order, in story structure, that should make the idea kind of immediately make sense to people. And it really came down to this realization: if we make sense of the world and we make sense of ideas through story, then that must mean that every idea has a story, because every idea is a story. Every idea, realization, conclusion that we come to is the product of our brain filling in a story in our head. So sometimes all it means that we have to do to find the story of an idea, or even the story behind a core message, go to market message, or whatever, is just rebuild that story. Because if we can rebuild that story, then we can rebuild for ourselves, and we can rebuild it in the minds of our audience, and kind of zap that idea kind of straight from us to them, without risk of, or minimizing risk, I should say, of distortion or them not understanding it, because we have basically just rewritten, or just kind of written, like inserted a line of code that their brain already knows how to read.
Yeah, and so on. I just want to say, we're, obviously, for the people who are in the community.momondays.com, they already know the value of story. But there are a lot of people who might be watching this on Facebook Live or on the YouTube channel that we have, Mo Mondays Video, who don't know quite as well how powerful story is. I mean, we think story is a buzzword, and it's nice, and maybe one day I'll learn how to tell a story. But there's a whole bunch of neuroscience and evidence and anthropological, did I say that right? Anthropological evidence that show just how wired we are as human beings for story. So you talk about the
Absolutely.
code.
Yes.
I mean, for millennia, this is how we made sense of the world, through story. And when we're listening to an innovation or a market message, what we're really doing is we're inserting ourselves as the key character in that story to see if it fits.
Correct. Absolutely. And if it fits, if it aligns with how we see the world, we're like, all right, yeah, that makes sense. I'll try that, or I support that. And if it doesn't, we're like, who needs it? Who
Yeah.
wants it? Who cares? Or, oh my gosh, why would you ever do it that way? And really, that's the split. It's just whether or not the story that the stories that you naturally go to. And I think, to your point about folks who are watching who may not be as steeped in story, that was a real discovery for me too, when I went starting to look, because I did not consider myself to be a good storyteller even as recently as about 4 or 5 years ago. And so I was like, I want to know how to do this. And one of the things that was so interesting to me as I was discovering that was that, when we hear the word story, a lot of us do think like once upon a time, like blah, 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 blah. But really, a story is anything where we are establishing and creating a connection between a perceived cause and a perceived effect. When we draw a conclusion that if this happens, this will be the result, or this was the result because that happened, either direction, that is the core of a story. And my favorite definition of a story is not mine. It's a storyteller Ron Plouf's definition. And he says, the story is the result of people pursuing what they want. And
whoa, I like that.
Isn't that good?
Say that again. Say that again so that I'll remember it, and the people
Sure.
who are watching this might want to write this down.
Yeah. So Ron Plouffe, Ploof, anyone looking for him, he defines story as a story is the result of people pursuing what they want. And he simplifies that even further by saying, stories are the product of roles, like who are the people, what role are they playing, events, the things that happen, and the influences, why they happen. And what I love about that definition of a story is that it does break it from, the hero's journey of, there's somebody who's called on a quest and then they go, no, and then a mentor comes along and it basically says that anytime that we are drawing conclusions about why something happens, we are doing that using the form of story. And that's where all the science and the neuroscience comes up, right. Is that is a universal code. Like, we are looking for, what does someone want? What's getting in their way? What's driving that? What do they do differently? What happened? It's just always what we're looking for. And so when you can start to break that, when you can break your understanding of the word story from fairy tales and, hey, there was this time when, to understanding that it really is, there's a structure underneath it that actually applies much, much more broadly, then you start to really get a sense of the true power of story. Because, like I said, that's the code. It's the universal code for how we make things make sense. So if you can make your idea, if you can put it into that code, then it's going to make sense. And that's really powerful, because it means you can not only, use this, you can use that to kind of create a story-like and story powerful version of your message. But it also means, and this is a work I do a lot with clients, it also means you can diagnose why a story you may be working with isn't working. Because it might be missing a piece of that code, or the code might be out of order, right? There's an error in the code. And it's just, all of that is just all of the reasons why I continue to just love this work. And figuring out and helping other people kind of discover this power of putting things into this code of story.
Yeah. You said something earlier that shocked me. And hopefully I maintained my composure. You said, I wasn't a very good storyteller. And the reason why that shocked me is because I was on your website, TamsenWebster.com, for anybody who wants to go there. TamsenWebster.com. And on your website, there's a video. And I pulled a 3-minute clip of that video of you sharing a story. Now, it's not a personal story, which is even better for our purposes, because people think the only story I'm interested in is a personal story. No, it's any story. It just so happens that when we're talking about founders and businesses, there's always a personal story. I'd like to share that video, 3 minutes, and then we're going to pick it apart a little bit. But I think this shows you as a master storyteller.
But this is the secret, that we are all smart, capable, and good. Now, I'm actually serious about this, and there will be a quiz later, so remember this. Because if you don't, it could drive you insane, like this guy. This is Ignaz Semmelweis. Now, Semmelweis was alive in 1847 in Vienna. He was a doctor in a teaching hospital there. And this teaching hospital had 2 maternity wards. There was one for teaching doctors and one for teaching midwives. They wanted to keep the patient levels even, so they admitted women on alternating days. But the patient levels weren't even because of 2 reasons. One, women were doing everything possible to avoid one of the wards. And they were doing it because of the second reason. They were much more likely to die there. In fact, 1 in 5 women didn't make it out of one of the wards alive. But in the other ward, it was 1 in 50. They were much more likely to survive. Now, what was causing these deaths was something called childbed or puerperal fever. It was a blood infection. But what was causing it, and where did it come from? Especially since women were dying more often in the doctor's ward. But then one day, one of Semmelweis's fellow doctors dies of childbed fever. And I assure you that he had not just given birth. Now, what had happened was he had nicked his hand with a scalpel after performing an autopsy on one of the women that had died. And that gave Ignaz an idea, because only the doctors performed autopsies. So he wanted to try an experiment. But that experiment meant doing something a little different, because this was 50 years before germ theory. At the time, doctors at the height of the knowledge thought that disease was spread by giant sheeted skeletons, which was really just a representation of something they couldn't see. They called them miasmas, or bad air. And this bad air was detectable by bad smells. So the experiment was to wash the smell off of their hands. And it worked. The mortality rate plummets to match that of the midwives' ward. And Semmelweis declared the savior of mothers. He gave them a green light to life. Now, that's not the whole story. Because as hard as it may be to believe, Semmelweis's fellow doctors gave him a red light. For reasons I'll explain, they rejected him. They rejected his idea. They fire him. They stop washing their hands. The mortality rate goes back up. And Semmelweis, now, with nobody wanting or believing his idea, and the fate of all of those women now sealed, literally goes insane. And in a tragic finale to this, within 2 weeks of being committed to an insane asylum, he dies of a blood infection, just like those women he wanted to save.
You are a master storyteller.
Well, thank you. And if nothing else, it's just an indicator that it can be a learned skill. Because this, like I said, I really, truly, as recently as 5 years ago, I didn't know the fundamentals of story. I didn't really know how. I would look at other people kind of like, wow, like my husband, for instance, master storyteller. And at the time I really started digging into this, I had a couple of different colleagues who were just so good at it. And I was just like, how do they do this? And that's part of the reason why I wanted to figure it out. Because I was like, I know it's powerful. It's so good when you can do it really well. I don't do it really well. What do I need to know in order to figure out how to do it well? So thank you for saying that I learned my lessons.
And so you did what I teach people to do. You know, first of all, you did what I did earlier. You seeded the audience. You said, remember this, and because we don't want this to happen to you. You did that right at the very beginning, and that creates a little space in people's minds to say, I've got to remember this. You added a little bit of humor, which is a question I get a lot. I assure you, he had not just given birth. Crack me up. Because there are loads of times you say, oh no, but my story, there's no humor, doesn't fit in it. As I guarantee you, if my mother can tell a story about Auschwitz when she was there, then and make it funny and make it hilarious, actually, then you can tell a story about whatever. There's no topic that's off limits for at least a little bit of humor. You brought that in, and people say, well, how long should a story be? I said, well, a really short story is 1 to 2 minutes. A really long story is 7 minutes. And that story came in at 3 minutes and 20. That's the clip that I took. So like right in there, right? Like good stuff. Great model. Okay. Enough. Stop it, Michelle. Let me ask you this. What was the point of that story?
So I need to answer this at 2 levels, because there's the point of the story as it was told there, and then there was the point of the story that ultimately it supported. Yeah. So the point of the story as told right in the beginning was that having a great idea and by extension, a great product or service isn't enough. Like just having the right answer isn't enough. And that was really what I was trying to get across, which was because everybody knows now that washing your hands is important, and washing your hands wasn't
advice. Yes.
Yeah, and I swear, yes, this talk has gotten just ever more applicable right now. But that was the point right there, because it was right at the beginning of the talk. It was meant to set up a point that like just having the right answer doesn't mean your audience is going to see it that way. Ultimately, kind of the big point that story, and I entwine it with another one actually over the course of the talk, is that in order to really get sustained change in thinking or behavior, you need to present that change in a way that's consistent with people's beliefs and not in contrast or in conflict with them. And that's the big point of that talk, is that you don't get permanent change by challenging someone's beliefs head on. You actually have to present a new behavior in the context of the world as they see it right now.
Yeah, and in the coaching world, people might use the term going to where the client is.
Yes. Yes.
This makes so much sense. No matter how much you believe you're right, if you present something as a challenge to especially core values, core beliefs, then they're going to be looking for ways to find you wrong.
100%. Yeah. And the thing I say right as I begin that, I say, there's the secret to getting the green light to your ideas, that people are smart, capable, and good. I present that in the course of the talk as actually the dominant belief that people have. Like the dominant belief of humans is to be seen as smart, capable, and good. So most people generally believe they are smart, capable, and good, but even if they don't, they want to be seen as smart, capable, and good, at least by their own in-group. And so that's the reason why if you challenge somebody head on, like you're violating the core belief of humans. And so, that story is really told in a way to just set up in kind of a way that kind of just surprises people, but also because it works at such a great foil with the other story I tell, which is actually how Florence Nightingale was successful with getting people to wash their hands and getting successful with doctors to wash their hands in a very similar situation. And frankly, with more working against her because she was female and therefore of a different status than the doc and a nurse, and therefore a different status than the doctors. Just showing how powerful that aligning a message with what people already believe and how they already see themselves in the world, namely presenting a message or a new behavior in a way that makes people preserve that smart, capable, and goodness. That's the key. And with this particular audience that I was talking to, which is in this case, this was marketing people and salespeople. It's useful for leadership as well, but with marketing people and salespeople, that's the dominant approach for selling a new product or a new behavior or a new idea, is actually to create a gap, right? It's to show that it's to try to change people's beliefs. It's try to say, well, you shouldn't want that. You should want this, or I know you believe this, but that's wrong. And it's kind of, and you should believe this other thing. And usually we do that in a way that doesn't remotely plug in all the lines of code that people need. And so it was really important for me to use something, because this is kind of pretty heady stuff. So I really needed to anchor it. I wanted to anchor it in a story that just people could get intuitively, because people get stories intuitively, so that they could just kind of see the situation, and then I could continue to use that plus the Florence Nightingale story as a way to.
So let's break that down a little bit. The doctor was not successful because he said, "You're wrong. It's not this thing in the ether or the air.
It's you."
Huh?
It's you, doctors. You're dirty, basically. It's like you have dirty hands, and your dirty hands are killing women. It's basically what happened.
Okay, so and Florence Nightingale, what did she do differently?
So what's interesting is that it's pretty subtle, but it was pretty important. So what Florence Nightingale did differently was that she understood and worked within how the doctors saw themselves. And the doctors, and this was consistent with Semmelweis's colleagues as well, like their job was to save their patients, right? That's why the doctors were doing autopsies. So when he was saying like the autopsies are actually what's killing these women, they're like, what are you talking about? Like that's why we're doing them. We're doing them so we can figure out what's killing them so that we can save them. And the doctors on the battlefield in the Crimea, which is where Nightingale was the same thing. Their job was to save people. And Nightingale knew this. And what she actually operated was like, okay, well, she created kind of a mental difference, kind of a new perspective that said, okay, well, doctors, you can save people. We, the nurses, are going to worry about stopping the spread of disease. So you keep saving people, and we're going to stop the spread of disease. And you don't really need to worry. We're just going to do all this other stuff. Don't worry about it. You just focus on saving people. And in fact, part of what she did was that she had the nurses wash the doctor's hands, because that allowed everybody to kind of maintain their roles. Like, you save people, we stop the disease, you're fine. Just, don't really pay attention to us. We're just doing this thing. And it allowed it to happen. And, a lot of people actually don't know this, but like Nightingale is one of the mothers, the parents of modern data science and of data visualization. And so she collected, both of them, both Semmelweis and Nightingale collected data, but she was able to visualize that data in such a way that it was super, super powerful. So that's really the difference, is that Semmelweis basically said, I know you think you're saving these women, but you're not. I know you think you're clean, but you're not. So you need to get clean in order to save them. And they were like, what are you even talking about? Nightingale said, I know you're trying to save them, and you are. We are trying to stop the spread of disease, and we're not. Can you work with us to help us do this thing? We're just going to try this thing of washing your hands just so that we can kind of figure out what's going on, and then collect a crap ton of data on it. So it's very subtle, but the big difference is that he worked against what they believed. What he presented conflicted with what they believed, and what she presented was consistent with it, was consistent with what they believed about themselves and about the world.
Let me jump a little bit. 4 years as an executive producer of TEDx.
Yes.
What did you learn about?
Oh my gosh, everything. Yeah, just anything I didn't learn as a Weight Watchers coach, which is also a significant part of my kind of, it is my professional life, but that's neither of these things has ever been my day job. The second most foundational learning experience was definitely, and has been and continues to be, working with TEDx Cambridge, because I still do work with them. So 7 years ago ish now, started as the executive producer. I stepped back when I started my business. So I kind of took about a year off and then came back in. They invited me back in to be what we now call the idea strategist, which I love. And what did I learn? What I learned, well, this whole process, so this is an interesting story. I worked at TEDx Cambridge in this bridge between working for another company and doing what I did now. And the company that I worked for was very powerful. It was a message strategy company. They did great work. And I started working with these TEDx Cambridge folks, kind of using a lot of their approach. When I decided to leave that company, I had to leave all of their IP behind, like all of it. That was the right thing to do. It was the kind of ethical thing to do, which meant that I had to invent very quickly a whole different approach. At the same time, I had spent 20 years up to that point in brand and message strategy. And so I kind of intuitively knew like how to find like the right message or the right idea. But in the case of a TEDx, like you can't just say, well, this is your idea and this is how you need to talk about it, because then it's not their talk anymore. Then it's not, they're going to lose that connection with the audience that's so important. So basically I had to figure out how to re-engineer, or actually reverse engineer, my brain. And I was like, well, I'm not that special. How does everybody's brain work? And this is where I kind of came on to story and started to invent it that way. So
can I just stop you there for a second? Because
100%.
What you just said is exactly what I tell. This is so funny. So I had to reverse engineer my own brain.
Yep.
And then when I learned how to do that, That's how I learned how to reverse engineer their brain.
Anybody's brain. Yes, 100%.
And that's
Yes.
the key.
Yes. Because it's I like to call it, it's, the story is the universal but unique code, right? It's like, here in the States, at least, we have this game called Mad Libs that kids play.
Sure.
Where there's, it's a story of sorts, where the blanks are empty, right? Where you have to fill in a noun or a verb or whatever. And so the way I explain it is to say, well, actually, all of us have that same basic structure in our head. And just like Mad Libs, there's certain blanks. And we as individuals have patterns. Like, we've kind of got our go-to word list, go-to concept list of how we like to fill in those blanks. And so if you understand what that basic story Mad Lib is, and B, how, what to fill in the missing blanks, and then C, what your own patterns are for that, well, then you really have just absolutely captured the power of making things make sense, period, to anybody. And so what's that was the biggest thing.
It always makes sense to the person because they naturally fill in the blanks.
Right, because they're automatic. Right, they don't even. Yeah, it's back to the code.
But for us, we have to figure out it's exactly the point of what are the blanks that are so obvious to you that you don't even know they're blanks.
That's right. And for me, when I'm working with clients, like, there's two that are always troublesome. Like, there's two of those blanks that are always troublesome. And the first is, how is it that they see a problem differently? How do they frame a problem that's different than other people? Because they do. Like, it's absolutely, that happened first. Like, so I had said for a long time that how we see drives what we do. I'm delighted to be currently working with a TEDx Cambridge speaker who this is actually her science. Now I can say that it's scientifically backed that what we see drives what we do. And so when someone comes up with a new approach to something, a new behavior, a new product, a new service, a new idea, it's because they suddenly saw or just discovered that they saw the world differently. And that's the first code that's really hard for people to spot, because it's just how they see the world. So how could it be different? And so the process that I use with folks to getting that is to contrast it. Well, like, how do most people see it? Why doesn't that work? Okay. And then we can get to it. And then the second blank that's really, really hard for people is the blank that I call the truth. It kind of fits in for that moment of truth that's in any great story where, the main character has to make a choice, and it's that choice that determines the ending. But that truth is usually based on either an academic or scientific discovery where they've actually discovered a new thing, or more commonly with, companies, thought leaders, those kinds of things. It's a baseline assumption that they have about how the world works. So for instance, one of the things I learned as a Weight Watcher leader was that action precedes motivation. And that's like bonkers to people, because they're like, wait, don't I have to want to do something before I do it? And I'm like, no, actually, because if you think about physics, a body at rest stays at rest and a body in motion stays in motion. Like, you actually have to do a thing before you have the momentum to keep doing it. And so if you understand that, then you can kind of release the power of motivation from something. But it took me a while to realize that was a base assumption for me. And it took me even longer to figure out how to explain it in such a way that people were like, oh yeah, actually that makes sense. But those are the two places, those two story blanks are the ones that are hardest for people, because those are examples of two examples of the deepest code of these, this Mad Lib of story that we've got in our heads.
So you already answered my next question. I thought I was so smart, remember? First, I'm going to ask her what was the biggest thing she learned from being an executive producer of TEDx. Then I'm going to ask her what is the biggest thing she learned from Weight Watchers, from being a Weight Watch leader. And you said action precedes
motivation. Yeah, I mean, you could also say action precedes momentum, and that way people would more naturally say yes to that action precedes momentum. Like, you actually have to start a thing before you're going to have the momentum to do it. If you get that people to agree that that's true, then it's a lot easier for them than to substitute motivation for that afterwards. And I wouldn't even say that's the biggest lesson, frankly. The biggest lesson from TEDx Cambridge was that there is, in fact, was the testing and the proving out through now hundreds of people that breaking an idea down into a story works, that it works to strengthen the idea and it works to serve as the basis for how you explain it to somebody else. And so that's the thing that I learned, that story structure is in fact this like magical, universal, unique code. The biggest thing I'd say I learned from Weight Watchers is very much the lesson of that getting the green light talk that we talked about. That you don't change behavior by challenging beliefs, you change behavior by confirming them. You just have to find the right combination of beliefs to put pressure on the behavior that you want to change. And that's where story comes in. So
again.
Yeah.
So you talked about the story structure or the elements, the key elements, and you mentioned two.
Yep.
I'm wondering, because again, people who are going to be watching this or watching this now, they're thinking, well, what are the elements I need to look for in my story? Is it easy for you to just itemize them?
It is actually. So I'm going to answer it quickly, and then I'm going to go back a little bit and explain, or you can ask me a question either way. But the 5 elements, just if you want to know them off the top, are a goal, a problem, a truth, a change, and actions. Like, those are the 5: goal, problem, truth, change, actions. And the reason why I settled on those 5, because there's tons of way that people describe story. But like I said, like 5 years ago, I was like, I'm crap at story. I want to learn how to tell stories better. I had no idea it was going to get me into what it did, right? And I was trying to, because these two different things kind of happened at the same time. I wanted to be a better storyteller, and I was trying to figure out how to do this thing for and so and then they met with what I now call the red thread. And everything I found about like how to tell a story was wildly frustrating to me, because everybody was like, a story has 3 acts, and like set up, conflict resolution.
I teach the same thing, but I'll also say, but that's not really very useful.
It's totally
true,
not
but it's
useful.
not very useful.
Because you're like, well, how do I do the setup, and what is the conflict, and how do I resolve it? And given who I knew I was working with the most, which were, academics, research experts, business experts, whatever, like, they don't have the time to sit back. These are not people who consider themselves generally to be terribly creative. And so they were not going to sit down and go, let me just think about what I can do to set up. And so I was like, all right, well, if we've got these 3 chunks, right? And these 3 chunks all together equal a story. Well, each of those chunks must have a beginning and an end, right? So if I don't know what to put in the middle, well, then all I have to do is find the endpoints, and that will tell me what to put in the middle. Okay, so then I was like, all right, story people, what's the setup? Well, the setup really is the moment where you establish, the story really gets going once you establish what it is that somebody wants, kind of back to Ron Plouf's definition. And in essence, that's what, an inciting incident, if you've ever heard that term, your listeners and viewers.
Or a triggering event.
Or a triggering event, whatever word you usually, like, whether you realize it at the time or not, that's the moment where something happens that indicates to us as the audience, this person wants something, right? Because it's a little tiny bit of conflict, or sometimes a big conflict that's all of a sudden establishes what they want. So the story, the setup starts when we establish what somebody wants. So that's what I call the goal. And in the context of business messaging or idea messaging, that's always the audience's goal. Or if you're telling your own origin story, it might be what was your goal, but generally,
but your goal should match
the
audience.
Your goal should be their goal, right? Exactly. And not your goal now. It should be the question they're asking.
Then. That's right.
Right, exactly. So not your expert version of the question, but like a lot of times I'll say to my clients, well, what's the wrong question, right? I know that there's a better question, but what question are they asking now?
That's a really smart
wrong
thing to
question.
Ask. Because that immediately lays the framework for your differentiation. Everybody else is answering the wrong question.
Correct. So what is the wrong question? What question are people asking right now? That's wrong, right? So that's the goal. And then that first act of the setup ends at the introduction of a problem that the character didn't know they had, right? That's it. Those are the endpoints. So that means, and then the next point that we need to figure out is, well, what is a problem that people don't know they have, right? So goal problem. And so, and by the way, yeah, you're right. If you ask people what's the wrong question, it makes finding that problem they don't know they have a little bit easier, because you can say, well, why is it the wrong question? Well, because if you ask it this way, then you're saying that the problem is over here, but I think the problem is over here.
Yeah,
Boom. We've just found it. Like, okay, like, yay. And by the way, as we were talking about before, there's your point of differentiation, because if most people look at it this way and you look at it this way, well, there's a point of differentiation, kind of like of many, but that's one significant one right there. So it's a goal. It's always, I like to call it a two-part problem, because I found in kind of the early days, if I just said a problem, people would just put a problem. But you have to create that contrast so that they see the difference between what is what's known and what's new, right? All right. So now this sets up the second block of a story. So we've got goal problem. Now we're in the second act, the conflict, right? So all right. So we've introduced it. So the beginning point is what we already have, is the problem. And we know it ends with something that leads them to start to resolve it, right? But there's something that happens in the middle, which is the decision to do something different. So, and middle is...
It's what I call in my structure, the turning point.
Correct. So it's the turning point. It's the climax. It's the midpoint, sometimes people say. Yeah. So, and I characterize it as from a messaging standpoint, as the truth, because as I said before, it is the moment where you've created a moment of truth. There's a moment of truth.
Absolutely right. And it's a moment.
It's a moment.
If there's ever an act out in a story that's worth doing, it's right there.
Absolutely. And often that moment of truth happens because something that somebody believes to be true is in, and it goes right up against something that they want, right? As a result of what they're doing, right? I believe this, the truth. I want this, the goal. Because I'm looking at the world this way, those two things, that goal is in jeopardy, right? And so that's that truth statement that we have to find in the middle, like what, and that's the one people skip the most, right? And we can come back to that, but no, we've been taught so much like problem solution. I'm like, no, you can't go problem solution. It's problem truth solution, problem truth change, as I like to call it. Because if you just give people problem solution, then you are opening yourself up to, I mean, frankly, it's circular reasoning, right? It's like you go to the doctor and like, hey, doc, it hurts when I do this. And the doctor says, well, don't do that. And that's basically what you say to someone a lot when you're like, well, the problem is you're not doing this thing. So the solution is to do this thing.
Yeah, you're missing all your, in between the two is your platform of credibility. That's where 100%. Your expertise is.
Right. And a lot of times it's where you are in full alignment with the people that you're talking to, because it's usually at the truth where you can really only tell them something there that is in alignment with how they see the world or how they see themselves. Mm-hmm. And if what you tell them there violates that, then it's not going to work. It's just not going to work, because it's really, really hard to get people to unwant a thing that they want, right? So that's why, by the way, if you anchor on something they already want, your message is already like 1,000 times stronger. And B, it's really hard to get someone to unbelieve what they already believe, or even frankly, to believe something new, however accurate it might be. It can happen over time, but it doesn't happen quickly. And most of the time when we're in messaging, we don't have a lot of time. So we've got to do that really quickly. So it's goal, problem, truth, right? And that truth forces a choice. And then that choice is what I call the change. So I use the word change rather than solution, because I don't want my folks to come in and say, well, so here's the product. I'm like, no. We have to talk, what's the shift and thinking or behavior that product represents. And so that's that endpoint. So that second act goes from problem through the truth to the change. And then the last piece, now we've got that last act, which is resolution, starts with the choice to change, right? So you either, and you're giving them a bunch of choices. Actually, you're basically saying, well, you can not want the thing that you want, or you can not believe the thing that I chose based on the fact I was pretty sure you're going to believe it. Or you can choose to kind of like look at things a little different. And usually it's a little easier for people to change their perspective than it is for them to change what they want to believe. So that's that change. And then the actions are really what you do to make that change concrete. And then when people say, well, what's the final endpoint? Well, the final endpoint is actually a return to the goal. So even though, I tend to think of this and explain it linearly, it's a big circle, as we all know, because that's when a story is over and whether it was a happy or a sad ending. Did they get what they wanted? And if they didn't get what they wanted, did they get what they needed instead? And so it's basically goal, problem, truth, change, action. Those are the 5 big ones. And then basically just because it's back to the goal. So
and there's one more thing that I add in that last act, and it's what unexpected things did I get?
Yeah, so I call that. So I'm very specific. I call it the goal revisited. And more often I borrow from Seth Godin, and I refer to that, similar to you, as the free prize. So what else did they get? So we revisit the goal and say, hey, look, you got this thing that you wanted.
Yeah. But wait, there's more.
And yeah, exactly. But wait, there's more. And you got this other thing. You got this. A lot of times, this is where, when I've got a client who really struggles to come up with an audience goal in the first place, because they're like, but the right question is this, like they're going to get all this other stuff. I'm like, just hold on to that.
Yeah.
Because when we get back to the goal, that's where you get to tell them that, like, just hold on to it. It'll come back, but it's just, you got to wait until they've like made the rest of the journey. And then you can say,
yeah,
all right.
Because they don't even know that's even possible at this point.
Oh no, because they can't. That's not how they see the world yet. Like you have to,
I get it.
You have to, and one of the ways that I explain it is to say, you have to recreate the conditions in your audience's mind that created the idea in yours in the first place. Right.
So
and you didn't start as an expert.
In the time that we have left, Tamsen, I really want to get to your brand, The Red Thread. And I want to ask you how did you come up with that? Why is it significant? And why should I care if I'm just watching this? Say, oh, Tamsen's the most engaging person in the world. And here's why I should care.
And here's why. All right. So the funny thing is so I was telling you the story about how I had to figure out how to reverse engineer my brain. So I had this process, right? Where I had figured out this goal, problem, truth, change, action piece. And I knew based on kind of like early tests, mostly with my TEDx Cambridge speakers, that it worked. But also as a marketer, I knew that kind of calling it the goal, problem, truth, change, action didn't really work. And I also, frankly, didn't want to kind of anchor yet another thing with story in the title, because I was like, oh, who needs that? I don't need the brand confusion with story brand and all the other story stuff that's out there. At the same time, thanks to another client I had, actually with who's my client? Ericsson, actually, was my client, Swedish company. I was having conversations with them and a client at State Street who also had a Swedish person who would regularly refer to kind of in question, as we were presenting information or whatever, they'd be like, what's the red thread of this? And I'm like, that is an awesome phrase. What do you mean by that? And they're like, don't you have that phrase in the US? I'm like, nope, no, not really. And I could tell contextually that the way they use it, and turns out, Nordic countries and German countries as well, generally means the kind of logical progression of arguments. It's the thing that makes things make sense, or in story, the theme or the argument. And so at the same time, I was like, here's this phrase, this idiom that means the thing that this process is. Why don't I just call this that? Because this what I now call the red thread is a process for finding, my red thread, capital R, capital T, is a process for finding red thread, little r, little t.
Yeah.
So that's how the name came about. But then when I started to, I was like, but why is it the red thread? Like, why do they call it that? Like, where does that come from? I started to dive in, and then I found that there is not just one, but 3 stories that just make it the perfect name for this process and for what it represents for a company, I think. The Swedish red thread is believed to have its roots in Greek mythology. Quickest version of this I can tell you is basically it's the tool by which Theseus mastered the maze in which the Minotaur lived. So Minotaur monster, half man, half bull. It was killing people. Theseus had to go kill it so that it wouldn't destroy Athens. But nobody could get through the maze, like even the Minotaur. And so he took a sword, stabby, stabby, killed the Minotaur, but he needed a way to find his way back out of the maze.
Oh,
so
and he used the thread. Yes.
So he used the thread to trace his steps so he could retrace the steps on the way out. And I was like, this is perfect, because this is exactly what I'm doing with my clients. They already found their way to the center of the maze, right? Like they started on the outside, they've got to the center of the maze, they slayed a monster, and they're like, oh my gosh, we've got a better way of slaying monsters. We got to go tell everybody. But in order to go and tell everybody, you actually have to retrace the steps for how you got there. So that's when I found that was the source of the Swedish phrase. I'm like, 100%, that's what I'm calling it. Trademark the crap out of it. But as I said, there actually are 2 other meetings that are also appropriate. So I'll pull those out when it's useful.
Why don't we save that for another show? We're at near the top of the hour, and I just want to make a funny little observation. It's funny how you got your brand from somebody else.
Yep.
And when I was explaining what I do to somebody, I said, I know I do something pretty special, but I don't know what it is. And he sat down with me for a few days and he drew it out of me. And then in the end, he just said to me, Michelle, it's like you help your clients find their essential message. And I said, oh, essentialmessage.com. It's available. And
Perfect.
I trademarked the crap out of that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it's the thing. Like, I do a lot of, like I said, I do a lot of work with academics and such, and it's a known term for them. When you're putting theses or papers together, they're like, well, you have to establish the red thread first. And again, even in the context of finding the red thread of a thesis or of a paper, there's just nothing to help people say how to do that. And it's similar to what Chris Anderson was saying with TED Talks. He would say, well, a great TED Talk has a through line, aka a red thread.
The red thread.
And again, didn't tell people, he described what it was, but not how to get there. And so I was like, I'm going to solve that problem. That's what I did.
And solve it you did. I think this has been an amazingly fast hour with you. I can't wait to when the borders open. I'm going to head down to Boston and have a coffee and a bourbon all at once with you.
Yes. And I'll happily get up to Toronto too. It's a great city.
We love it here, but my brother lives in Boston, so I'm happy to get there too.
Well, that's easy then. Yes.
If people want to reach out to you or look or ask you to help them find their red thread,
100%. Yeah.
TamsenWebster.com.
TamsenWebster.com. You got it. And I do actually do kind of like quick reaction video kind of reviews of people's messages. And if somebody just wants to send me that, they can send that to me at redthreadme. So red thread plus like me at Tamsen. Redthreadme at TamsenWebster.com.
Awesome. This has been phenomenal. Tamsen, I want to thank you for your generosity in everything you've shared. It's almost as if you just gave so much. You really did. Now, we know the hard part is actually applying it. You always need somebody else to do it for you. You can't do it yourself. But you just gave so much information and heart and expertise, and I just love it. And this has been great. I really want to thank you.
Oh, thanks,
Um,
Michelle.
and we'll figure out how to do this again, Tamsen.
Absolutely. Well, it was a pleasure. So I love that we both help people find their essential messages, aka the red thread.
Ooh,
And
thank you. I
it's
see what
nice.
you
It's
did
just
there.
nice to have a fellow traveler on this road, because it's you and I mean, I know you love this work as much as I do, but it's important because people have amazing ideas. And I just, I would hate that it's a simple matter of words that gets in the way of people finding that power.
Can you say that again?
Oh, it's just people have such amazing ideas that I think it would be such a loss for words, mere words, to get in the way of people finding the power of those ideas.
That is where our contribution is to the universe. Thank you, Tamsen. Thank you. See you
You're
soon.
welcome. All right.
And
Bye.
I want to thank you for watching another episode of moTV. We posted at momondays.com. We posted at Facebook Live on our Facebook page. We posted on our YouTube channel at Mo Mondays Video on YouTube. And we also are posting the links to it in our community, community.momondays.com. Community.momondays.com. It's something that we started a few months ago, and I am so thrilled because we are getting people from all over the world joining this community, people who are real kindred spirits, who are all interested in the power of story to help them lead better, sell more, manage people, coach people better, find who they are better, use story for introspection, and as we just saw with Tamsen Webster, use it to market and brand ourselves in probably the most powerful way known to man. Thank you and woman. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next month where we have another exciting guest.